Disclaimer. This story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The message came just as the office lights were dimming, when the quiet hum of the building had begun to settle into the kind of silence that makes every thought louder. Come to my office. It's important. No explanation. No context. Just her name at the bottom, like a signature that carried more weight than it should have. I told myself it was work, some last-minute issue, a deadline, something routine. But even then, I knew better. There was always something different about the way she looked at me. Too long. Too knowing. By the time I reached her door, my pulse had already betrayed me. She didn't say anything when I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me, louder than it should have, sealing us into a space that suddenly felt too small. She stood by her desk at first, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. Then she moved, slowly, deliberately, not toward me but around me. I tried to speak, to ask what this was about, but the words never quite formed. Her silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, intentional. Every step she took echoed softly against the floor, circling me like she was studying something she hadn't quite decided how to handle. Or maybe something she had already decided, and was just savoring. Her gaze traced details I didn't realize were visible. The way my shoulders stiffened. The way I held my breath. The way I didn't turn to follow her, even though I felt her presence shifting behind me, beside me, too close. This wasn't how bosses called meetings. You stayed late, she finally said, her voice low, controlled, but softer than I'd ever heard it. Not a question. More like an observation that carried something else beneath it. Something personal. I swallowed. So did you. A pause. Then the faintest hint of a smile I couldn't see, only feel. She stepped closer. Not close enough to touch. Not yet. But close enough that I could sense the warmth of her presence. Could feel the subtle shift in the air between us. My instincts told me to move, to create space, to remind both of us where the lines were drawn. But I didn't, because the truth was, those lines had been blurring for weeks. Maybe longer. Her hand brushed the edge of the desk beside me. Not touching me, but close enough that the absence of contact felt intentional. Measured. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. Like she was waiting to see if I would react. I didn't. Not outwardly. Inside, everything shifted. Do you know why I asked you here? She asked quietly. I turned then, just enough to face her, and immediately regretted it, because now I could see her expression. The calm confidence. The way her eyes held mine, not with authority this time, but with something far more dangerous. Something that didn't belong in a workplace, or a conversation that was supposed to be professional. I shook my head, even though part of me already knew. She stepped closer again. Closer than before. Close enough that the space between us disappeared, and the tension that had been building all evening finally settled into something undeniable. When she leaned in, her voice dropped just enough to feel like a secret meant only for me. And in that moment I realized this was never about work. The air between us tightened, like something invisible had been pulled taut, ready to snap or pull us closer. I didn't move, neither did she. For a moment we just existed there, suspended in that fragile space where one decision could change everything. Her eyes searched mine, not with hesitation, but with a kind of quiet certainty that made it harder to look away. Like she already knew what I was thinking, what I'd been trying not to think for weeks. You've been different lately, she said softly. It wasn't an accusation. It felt more like a confession disguised as observation. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady something inside me that refused to settle. Different how? Her gaze flickered, just briefly, to my lips before returning to my eyes. That tiny movement sent a ripple through me I couldn't ignore. Distracted, she replied. Careful, like you're trying very hard not to cross a line. There it was. Not spoken outright, but understood. My jaw tightened slightly. Maybe I just know where the line is. A faint smile touched her lips then. Not amused, not dismissive, but knowing. Do you? The question lingered longer than it should have. Because the truth was I wasn't sure anymore. Her hand moved again, this time not to the desk, but closer, hovering just near my sleeve. Not touching, just there. The absence of contact felt louder than anything else in the room. "You're a good employee," she continued, her voice quieter now, like each word was chosen with care. "You keep things professional. Predictable. Predictable." I almost laughed at that, because nothing about this moment felt predictable. "Is that a problem?" I asked, though my voice came out lower than intended. She tilted her head slightly, studying me again, like she was deciding how honest she wanted to be. "No," she said after a pause. "It's what makes this complicated." Complicated. The word settled heavily between us. I felt it then, the shift. Not in distance, but in awareness. The way neither of us stepped back. The way neither of us tried to end the conversation. Because neither of us wanted to. Her fingers finally made contact. Just barely. A light brush against my sleeve, like it could have been accidental. But it wasn't. It lingered a fraction too long. Long enough for me to feel it. Long enough for her to know I felt it. Every instinct I had told me to step back. To create space. To remind myself of everything that made this a bad idea. But my body didn't listen. Instead, I turned slightly toward her, closing that last inch of distance without even realizing it. Her breath caught. So did mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Words felt unnecessary now. Too small for what was happening in the silence. "You should go," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. It didn't sound like a command. It sounded like a test. I didn't move. Her eyes searched mine again, deeper this time. Not just curiosity, something more vulnerable. Something uncertain. Like she wasn't sure what I would choose. Like she wasn't sure what she wanted me to choose. "This isn't a good idea," I said quietly, even as I stayed exactly where I was. "I know," she replied just as softly. Another pause. Another moment where the world narrowed down to nothing but the space between us. Her hand shifted slightly, no longer just brushing my sleeve. Now resting there, light but intentional. Grounding, or maybe undoing. I could feel the warmth of her touch through the fabric, steady and real, pulling me further into something I wasn't ready to name. "Then why does it feel like we're both waiting for something to happen?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her gaze dropped, just for a second before lifting back to mine. And this time there was no pretending. No distance. No professionalism left to hide behind. "Because we are," she whispered. And just like that, the silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we hadn't done yet. Something shifted after she said it. Not in the distance between us, but in the weight of everything surrounding it. Reality crept back in, slow and unwelcome. The office, the silence of the building, the fact that just beyond those walls was a world where this, whatever this was, couldn't exist without consequence. Her hand was still resting lightly on my sleeve, but now it felt different. Not just grounding, but hesitant. Like she was aware of it in a way she hadn't been seconds ago. Like she was thinking about what it meant. "I shouldn't have called you here," she said quietly. The words didn't match the way she looked at me. I exhaled slowly. "But you did." A flicker of something crossed her face. Regret, maybe, or frustration. Not at me, but at the situation neither of us seemed able to step away from. "You don't understand," she added, her voice tightening just slightly. And that, more than anything, created distance. Not physical, but something deeper. "Then help me understand," I said. For a moment it seemed like she might. Her lips parted slightly, her gaze softening. Not with desire this time, but with something heavier, more complicated. Like there were words she had carried for a while and didn't know how to set down. But instead she stepped back. Just one step. Felt like more. Her hand slipped away from my sleeve, and the absence of it was immediate. Cold, almost. Like something vital had been pulled back before I could hold on to it. "This isn't just about us," she said, turning slightly, creating just enough space to breathe again, but not enough to feel unaffected. "It never could be." The words landed harder than I expected. Because she was right. And I hated that she was right. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing once before stopping again. Still too close to her. Still caught in the gravity of everything unsaid. It doesn't feel like that, I admitted. She let out a soft, almost humorless breath. That's the problem. Silence stretched between us again. But it was different now. Thicker. Not just with tension, but with restraint. With things we were choosing not to do. My eyes drifted back to hers, drawn there like before, like always. And for a second, just a second, I thought she might step forward again. She didn't, but she didn't look away either. That almost made it worse. You think I haven't noticed? She said, her voice lower now, more vulnerable than before. The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. The way you stop yourself from saying things you almost say. My chest tightened, because she saw it. All of it. And you think I haven't noticed you doing the same? I replied. That hit. I could see it in the way her expression shifted. Not shocked, but exposed. The truth was out there now, hovering between us without a place to land. Her gaze dropped briefly, and when it came back, it wasn't guarded anymore. It was honest. Too honest. I have more to lose than you do, she said quietly. There it was. The line. Clear. Unavoidable. Position. Reputation. The unspoken rules neither of us could pretend didn't exist. I took a small step closer without thinking, closing the space she had created earlier. She didn't move away, but I saw it, the hesitation. Not fear. Not rejection. Control. My hand lifted slightly, instinctive like it wanted to reach for her, but I stopped myself just before contact. That invisible line again, right there between us. Her eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. And for a moment, everything stilled. We were close enough now that I could feel her breath again. Close enough that leaning in would be effortless. Natural. Dangerous. Her lips parted slightly, not an invitation, not quite, but not refusal either. I leaned in, just a fraction. And she did too. It wasn't planned. It wasn't decided. It just happened. Until it didn't. Because at the last second, she turned her head, just enough. Not a rejection. A restraint. My breath caught as I stopped, barely inches away now, the space between us heavier than anything before. We can't, she whispered, but her voice trembled, and neither of us moved away. The word can't didn't move either of us. It lingered between our breaths, fragile and unconvincing, like something said out of obligation rather than truth. Her face was still turned slightly away, but not enough to break the moment. Just enough to hold it in place, suspended on the edge of something neither of us had the strength to end. I could feel the warmth of her presence, the subtle rise and fall of her breath, the tension in the way she held herself so carefully still. It wasn't distance. It was control. And it was slipping. Then why didn't you step back? I asked, my voice quieter now, roughened by everything building beneath it. She closed her eyes for a brief second, as if the question pressed against something she'd been trying to keep contained. When she opened them again, they weren't guarded anymore. They were honest. Because I don't want to, she admitted. The words landed softly, but they changed everything. The air shifted again, heavier now, charged in a way that felt almost impossible to ignore. My restraint, already fragile, began to crack under the weight of it. Neither of us moved right away, but something inside both of us had already crossed the line. My hand lifted again, slower this time, giving her time to stop me, to step away, to say something that would pull us back into safety. She didn't. Instead, she inhaled, unsteady but certain, and let it out just as slowly. That was all it took. My fingers brushed hers. Barely. A soft, fleeting contact that should have meant nothing but didn't. It was like touching something electric. Not sharp or sudden, but warm, consuming, immediate. Her hand tensed under mine, not pulling away, not holding on, just feeling it, the same way I was. Every thought I had scattered. Every reason to stop faded into the background. Her eyes dropped to where our hands met, then slowly lifted back to mine. There was no hesitation left there now. No pretending. Just truth. I've tried to ignore this, she whispered. Every day, every conversation, every moment you walk into a room and I feel it before I even look at you. My chest tightened, the confession pulling something out of me I hadn't meant to give. You think I haven't, I said, my voice barely above a breath. You think this has been easy for me. A faint, almost broken smile touched her lips, not from humor but recognition, understanding. Her fingers shifted slightly against mine, not quite intertwining, but no longer accidental either. The contact deepened just enough to feel intentional. Grounded. Real. This is a mistake, she said again, softer this time, like she needed to hear it, but didn't believe it. Then why does it feel like the only honest thing we've done? I asked. That did it. Something in her expression gave way, not completely, not recklessly, but enough. She stepped closer. No hesitation this time. No careful distance. The space between us disappeared completely, and suddenly, everything felt too close, too intense, too real to step away from. My other hand hovered for a second before settling lightly at her arm, steadying more than holding. The contact was simple, gentle, but it sent a wave through both of us. Her breath caught again, sharper this time. Mine followed. Neither of us looked away. Not when her hand shifted slightly more into mine. Not when my fingers tightened just enough to acknowledge it. Not when the silence between us grew louder than any words we could have spoken. Her gaze flickered, just once, to my lips, then back to my eyes. A question. A warning. An invitation we both understood but hadn't accepted. Yet, I leaned in again, slowly, carefully, giving her time, giving myself time. This time she didn't turn away, but she didn't close the distance either. We stopped there, right at the edge of something irreversible. Breath mingling, hearts unsteady, everything suspended in that single, fragile moment. And neither of us dared to be the one who broke it. The storm had started sometime between their silence and their surrender. Rain traced restless patterns against the glass, soft at first, then steadier, like the sky itself had given in to something it could no longer hold back. The office lights had dimmed to a warm, muted glow, wrapping the room in a quiet intimacy that felt far removed from the world outside. Neither of them remembered moving, only that somehow, the distance that once held them apart no longer existed. Her forehead rested lightly against his for a moment, both of them breathing the same unsteady air, as if grounding themselves before stepping into something they knew they wouldn't be able to undo. This changes everything, she whispered. It wasn't fear. It was truth. I know, he replied just as softly, and yet, neither of them stepped away. Her hand tightened slightly in his. Not clinging, not hesitant, just certain, like she had finally stopped questioning something that had been quietly growing for far too long. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant. Inside, everything narrowed down to the space between them. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time, one last chance to pull back, to rebuild the walls they had spent so long trying to maintain. She didn't. Instead, she leaned in, not quickly, not impulsively, but with a quiet, undeniable certainty. And when the space between them finally disappeared, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't overwhelming. It was inevitable. Her breath melted into his, soft and searching, like something long held finally finding its way free. The world outside blurred into nothing, the storm, the office, the rules, all fading into the background as something far more powerful took their place. His hand found her shoulder, then the curve of her arm. Not claiming, not demanding. Just there, steady, present, real. Her fingers followed the line of his sleeve, then higher, like she needed to confirm that this moment, this closeness, wasn't something she had imagined. It wasn't. Every small movement spoke louder than words ever could. The way she exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something she had carried alone. The way he paused, just briefly, as though memorizing the feeling before it slipped away. The way neither of them rushed, because neither of them needed to. This wasn't about urgency. It was about finally allowing what had always been there. The rain deepened, steady and endless, a quiet rhythm against the windows that matched the slow, unspoken cadence between them. Her head rested lightly against him now, not hiding, not uncertain, just close. Closer than they had ever been. Close enough that silence felt full instead of empty. "I tried to fight this," she murmured, her voice barely more than a breath. "I know," he said, because he had too. But something about this night, the storm, the quiet, the way everything had led them here, made resistance feel distant, irrelevant. Her hand moved again, this time not tentative, certain, resting against him like it belonged there. And maybe it did. For now, that was enough. No more lines, no more pretending, just this moment, this closeness, this quiet, breathtaking surrender to something neither of them could deny anymore. Outside, the storm carried on. Inside, they finally stopped holding back. Morning didn't arrive gently. It slipped in through the tall glass windows in pale streaks of light, washing over the quiet office in a way that felt almost intrusive, like it was exposing something that had only belonged to the night. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt heavier than the rain itself. She was already awake, sitting by the window, arms loosely folded, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the skyline, but not really seeing it. The city moved on as it always did, unaware, unaffected. Unlike her, behind her he stirred. There was a pause, a quiet moment where neither of them spoke, yet everything from the night before lingered between them. Not awkward, not distant, just present, real. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to piece together where the night had ended and this morning had begun. "Hey," he said softly. She didn't turn right away, not because she didn't hear him, but because she needed a second longer. When she finally looked back, her expression wasn't regretful. But it wasn't simple either. "Hey," she replied. The word carried more weight than it should have. He studied her for a moment, as if searching for something. An answer, a signal, something that would tell him how to feel about what had happened. "Are you okay?" he asked. A simple question, a complicated answer. She exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening slightly against her arm before relaxing again. "I don't know yet. Honest." That was something they hadn't lost. He nodded, not pushing further, understanding more than she had said out loud, because he felt it too. Not regret, but not clarity either. Something in between, something unfinished. "I meant what I said," he added after a moment, "about it not just being a moment." Her eyes softened slightly at that, but there was something else there too, something guarded. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it harder." Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It carried everything they hadn't figured out yet, everything that had changed overnight. She stood then, smoothing her sleeve unconsciously, slipping back into a version of herself that looked more like the person the world expected her to be, composed, in control. But her eyes gave her away. "You should go before anyone gets here," she said gently. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dismissive. It was careful. He stood too, slower this time, as if leaving meant more than just walking out of the room. "Is that what you want?" he asked. The question lingered. She hesitated. "Just enough." "It's what we need," she answered. Not the same thing. They both knew it. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back one last time. The distance between them felt different now. Not charged like before, but not empty either. Something deeper. Something that didn't disappear with daylight. Before either of them could say anything else, a sharp knock broke the moment. Both of them froze. Another knock, firmer this time. Her expression shifted instantly. Professional, composed, but the tension beneath it didn't disappear. "Come in," she called. The door opened, and everything changed. A senior executive stepped inside, his presence commanding, his gaze sharp as it moved between them, taking in the room, the distance, the timing. Too perceptive, too aware. "I didn't realize you were still here," he said, his tone neutral, but not entirely. Her posture straightened slightly. We were just wrapping up. A beat of silence. The kind that carried questions no one asked out loud. The man's gaze lingered just a second too long before he nodded. My office. 10 minutes. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut again. But the air he left behind felt heavier than before. She didn't move right away. Neither did he. Because now it wasn't just about them anymore. And somehow that made everything they felt even more impossible to ignore. The office felt different after that door closed. Not quieter, just heavier, like something invisible had settled into the walls. The kind of weight that doesn't come from what's been said, but from what can't be undone. She didn't look at him right away. Instead, she walked back toward the window, her reflection faint against the glass as the morning stretched fully into the room. The city outside was awake now, alive, moving, indifferent. Inside, everything had slowed. You should go, she said again, softer this time. But it didn't sound like distance. It sounded like care. He didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because he understood what she was trying to protect. Not just her position or his, but the fragile truth of what they had stepped into. Still, his feet didn't move. Last night, he began, then stopped, searching for words that didn't feel small. She turned then, and for a moment, the version of her that faced him wasn't the composed executive or the guarded woman from before. It was just her. Honest, open, uncertain. It mattered, she said before he could finish. Simple, but enough. Something in his chest loosened at that. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. A quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it hadn't been imagined. It hadn't been one-sided. It hadn't been just a moment. It had been real. He stepped closer. Not too close this time, not crossing anything that couldn't be managed, but enough to hold the space between them with intention. Then what happens now? He asked. Her gaze softened, but there was resolve in it too. Now? She paused, the word lingering as she searched for something steady to stand on. We don't pretend it didn't happen. A breath. But we don't let it break everything else either. The balance in her voice was careful. Not cold. Not detached. Just honest. He nodded slowly, because that made sense. Even if it wasn't what either of them might have wanted in another life, another setting, another version of this story. Can you do that? She asked quietly. He held her gaze steady and sure. I can try, he said. It wasn't a promise, but it was real. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, bittersweet, but genuine. That's enough, she said. Another silence followed, but this one was different. It wasn't filled with tension or restraint. It was filled with understanding. He took a step back then, finally the distance between them returning, not as a loss but as something chosen, respected. At the door he paused, his hand resting lightly against the handle. For a moment, it felt like the night flickered back into existence. The storm, the closeness, the way everything had felt inevitable. He glanced back at her. She hadn't moved, but her eyes held his, steady, warm, unspoken, and somehow that said more than anything else could have. He gave a small nod. Something quiet, something just for her. Then he opened the door and stepped out. The hallway was bright, normal, unaware. Behind him, the office remained still, but not unchanged. Inside, she exhaled slowly, her hand lifting unconsciously to rest just over her heart. As if something there still echoed, still lingered. Not regret, not loss, something softer, something that would stay. Because some moments don't need to last forever to matter. Sometimes, they live on in the quiet spaces, like a memory that doesn't fade, only settles deeper with time. And sometimes, that's enough.